Hey, hope your day or night's going well. Let's talk about Rage. No, not that kind. Rage is a first-person shooter developed by id Software and released in October of 2011. Now when you think of id Software, you most likely think of stuff like Doom, Quake, Wolfenstein, maybe even Commander Keen if you're a bit older. Rage was id's first shot at a brand new IP in quite a while, and was a fairly major departure from the type of games they were typically known for. Let's see how they did. Let's first quickly talk about what it's like to play Rage today. I'm going to be using the official Steam release, but with a couple adjustments. You see, Rage's PC port isn't great, at least on modern hardware. It's missing a lot of features that you would expect in a PC shooter, and it can be a bit challenging to get running well for someone that doesn't have a lot of experience with PC games. The two big ones are definitely the fact that the game by default is hard capped to 60 frames a second, as well as there being no obvious field of view slider in the settings. And then this game, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to play nice with modern computer hardware. It's got this really bad screen tearing issue that, from my understanding, wasn't an issue back when this game came out. Fortunately, these things can all be fixed very easily. You simply download these files someone made, add it to the game install folder, edit a few lines of text in Notepad, hit save, and you're good to go. That will allow you to raise the FPS cap to anything you want. And then to get a wider FOV, you just go into the console and input this command. Now as for the screen tearing issue, simply forcing VSync on in the NVIDIA control panel did the trick for me, but you may or may not have that issue depending on your hardware configuration. I'll have the link to that mod in the description if you're interested. Alright, let's start with the visuals. Visually, Rage is a bit of a mixed bag for several reasons, but let's start with the positives. Rage is running on id's brand new at the time id Tech 5 engine. Now id Tech 4 already looked fantastic, but this engine is even better. This is easily some of the best lighting that you will see in a game from this time, and it's used to great effect. Whether you're driving through the Wasteland canyons or fighting your way through a destroyed building, Rage's lighting always looks excellent. But the real upgrade over id's previous titles is definitely the animation work. Every NPC that you interact with in this game has this whole set of animations that they go through while they're talking to you, and it really helps convey whatever it is that they're telling you. Not to mention those animations they like to show off whenever you get a new weapon, which all look great. The art direction also holds up quite well. It's got this kind of Borderlands-esque, almost comic book style drawing to it. Now let's get to what doesn't look so great. My biggest issue is undoubtedly the pop-in. My god, I don't think I've seen pop-in even close to this bad in another game before. And I don't mean the kind of pop-in where you move back a few feet and a faraway building just disappears, for example. Everything, and I mean literally everything in this game is constantly loading in when you look at it. This happens when you're driving a vehicle, exploring a building, or even just walking into a different room. It is shameless, and I'm kind of amazed they actually let this game release like this. There's nothing you can do to get rid of it, regardless of the hardware you have, it's simply just how the game was made. It doesn't ruin the atmosphere or anything, but I would be lying to you if I told you that this wasn't extremely distracting. It constantly breaks your immersion and reminds you that you're playing a video game made up of ones and zeros. Now aside from that, Rage can get a little boring to look at after a while. Everything has this muted color tone appearance, and it causes most environments to feel extremely similar to one another. We'll get into it more during the gameplay, but some of the missions in this game can really start to blend together after a while, and this color palette isn't exactly helping. Let's talk about the story next. Rage begins with a cutscene that quickly sets up the story. In the year 2029, an asteroid collided with Earth, completely eradicating most of human civilization. So in order for the species to live on, a special program was created known as the ARK program. An ARK is a large shelter that houses human beings called ARK survivors. These ARKs were created and placed far beneath Earth's surface in the hope that humanity would live on in the event of such a disaster. Right after the cutscene ends, we begin our journey as an ARK survivor on our now wasteland of a planet. Rage doesn't waste your time with tutorials or long strings of dialogue, and instead gets you right into the main objective. As soon as you climb out of your ARK ship, you meet a man named Dan Hager, who immediately gives you a gun and an ATV for your first mission. This mission involves heading to a base for an enemy type known as the Bandits, and taking them out. This isn't the only enemy type though, there's also the Mutants and the Authority. The Authority is essentially the military, acting as a much more technologically advanced group of people that controls the majority of the remaining land on Earth. And then the Mutants are failed science experiments conducted by the Authority in an attempt at making super soldiers. Finally, the last major faction is the Resistance. You see, the Authority isn't exactly the best group of people. They want to control everything and everyone through any means necessary, and they especially have it out for ARK survivors. Because of that, the Resistance was created in order to fight back against the Authority. Given your arc status, you join the Resistance and quickly become a key figure in their war against the Authority. You don't play as anyone particular in Rage. It's one of those games where you're meant to basically insert your own personality into your character. Now, while Rage has a great setup and a very interesting premise, the story as a whole isn't anything special or even remotely memorable. There just isn't a whole lot that actually happens in this game after the initial cutscene, and one key moment very late in the game. There also isn't many interesting characters to speak of. Every character in this game has one purpose, and that purpose is to tell you what to do and where to go next. Aside from the occasional radio call, the narrative is handled entirely through these fairly lengthy dialogue sessions between you and one or more other people. I will say the voice acting is very good, and combined with the top tier animation work, it does do a good job of keeping you invested. One thing I want to mention though is that the ending to this game sucks. It's incredibly anticlimactic, and I guarantee you almost everyone that has beaten this game before had the words, "that's it," in their mind as the credits rolled. The last few chapters are spent building up to this important object, and the final mission just ends out of nowhere with nothing even remotely interesting or memorable happening. I sat down to write the script for this video about 3 hours after beating the game, and I already can't tell you what happened in the last mission. So at the end of the day, the story in Rage is all set dressing for the gameplay, and to provide some decent lore to look into. It's serviceable for what it is, but it's unlikely to leave a long-lasting impression on you. Let's talk about the gameplay next. The gameplay of Rage is very straightforward, but also quite different from anything id Software has done before. I'm going to separate this between two different parts, the vehicle sections and the on-foot sections. We'll start with the vehicles first. Given the structure and progression of Rage, it made sense early on to incorporate vehicle mechanics into its gameplay. You're given one almost immediately for your first mission. Although this one doesn't have any weapons on it, and you won't have it for long, this is just for you to get used to the driving. The vehicle handling in Rage is solid enough, inputs feel responsive, and it never feels like you're going to lose control out of nowhere. A couple missions later, and you'll unlock the Dune Buster, which is where the vehicle combat begins. As you're driving through the Wasteland, you'll frequently come across enemy vehicles that you can either choose to fight or just drive past and try to outrun them. The vehicle combat is very basic. You simply get behind an enemy vehicle, wait for the lock-on to engage, and then fire away. Most enemies go down extremely easily, but occasionally you'll come across a group of higher tier ones that will give you a tough time. There's not actually much of a point in engaging in vehicle combat, aside from the occasional side quest that requires it and for the cash it gives you. When you take out an entire group of vehicles, you get the slow motion effect, which is pretty cool. Combat isn't the only thing you can do in the vehicles though. As you drive around, you'll come across these flying objects that you can try to hit with your vehicle by launching it off a ramp, which is fun. And then there's these meteor shower events that will happen occasionally, and you need to collect all of them before the timer runs out, sometimes while fighting enemy vehicles. There's also some racing events that you can do in Rage. These are required a few times to progress the story, but after that, they're optional. This is how you earn the resources needed to upgrade your vehicle with stuff like better weapons, shields, ammo types, stuff like that. The races themselves are incredibly easy. I never came even remotely close to losing one of these. So overall, the vehicles are fun to use thanks to the amount of things that you're able to do with them, but ultimately, their use is just to get you from point A to point B. That brings me to the on-foot sections and the combat. So like the vehicles, Rage's combat isn't anything new or super interesting. All the weapons that you would expect are here, like the pistol, shotgun, assault rifle, and a bunch of other ones. This is an id game after all, so it should come as no surprise that they all feel great to use. The thing is, the combat in this game isn't super engaging or challenging. All the enemies you fight look very similar to one another. Combine that with their downright awful AI, even on the higher difficulties, and it makes for a fairly easy and generic shooter experience. I'm not sure if it's because this game was also designed for mobile or what, but these enemies are just boring to fight. Nothing they do makes any sense, and they have aim that would make stormtroopers jealous. Seriously, you can just run out in the open towards these guys, and more often than not, you aren't going to take much damage. Rage also has this whole crafting system in place that allows you to make stuff like medpacks, explosive RC cars, and these contraptions required to open locked doors. This is a cool addition at first, but you'll probably forget it's even there pretty quickly until you're required to use it. That then brings me to the level design, and this is just bad. Almost every single mission in this game plays out the exact same way. Get your quest from someone in town, drive your vehicle to the location, enter some old abandoned building or subway station, fight your way through incredibly linear hallways that all look the same, collect an item at the end, fight some more enemies, run back to the entrance, drive back to base and get a new mission. Rinse and repeat. It gets so repetitive so fast, and the game never tries to shake things up. From the moment you get your first weapon until the credits roll, this is what you're doing. There are a couple things that you can do in between missions, like upgrading your weapons or playing this minigame, but driving and shooting is going to make up the bulk of your playtime. Rage isn't a long game. It takes anywhere from about 8 to 10 hours depending on the number of side missions that you decide to complete. Now I want to make something clear. Rage's gameplay is not bad. It's just fairly generic and gets repetitive very fast. Have you ever been to a Walmart before and seen those bargain movie bin things, and it's just filled with random movies you've never heard of before, so you decide to check one out and it ends up being alright? That's how I see Rage. Rage is not a game that's going to win you over with an amazing story or incredible gameplay. Rage is a game that you turn your brain off for, drive some cool cars, shoot a bunch of enemies for 8 hours, and then never think about again, which is perfectly fine. It's like when you go see a Fast and Furious movie, because you know exactly what you're going to get from it. Now if you do end up really liking Rage, you can thankfully get more of it. In December of 2012, an official expansion for Rage was released called Rage the Scorchers. Like pretty much all id game expansions, this is a very straightforward add-on. This DLC is entirely focused on a new enemy threat called the Scorchers. Like the base game's main enemies, these guys aren't super interesting, and fighting them is no difference. However, you do get a new weapon to use against them called the Nail Gun, and this weapon is very fun to use. As far as the story goes, it's very simple. The Scorchers are bad people doing bad things. Go stop them. The level design here is actually quite a noticeable step up compared to the base game. The environments are still extremely linear, but a lot of the areas that you move through look noticeably different than previous areas, which is a very welcome improvement. The ending here is also much better than the base game's ending. You actually get a satisfying ending this time around, complete with a boss fight, albeit an easy one. The Scorchers isn't a very long expansion. It takes anywhere from 1.5 to 3 hours to beat. So if you're looking for more Rage, this is a solid add-on, but there's nothing here that's going to change your mind if you weren't already a fan of the base game. And that's Rage. It's obvious that I don't think Rage is a great game, but for its low asking price, especially when it's on sale, you could do a lot worse. And I think as long as you temper your expectations and know what you're getting into, you won't be disappointed. Rage would eventually get one mainline sequel in 2019 in the form of Rage 2, so maybe I'll take a look at that someday. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.